She was a member of this RAC, as well as an important advocate and role in the early childhood field in Oregon. And then as we transition, we really called this meeting because we wanted to touch base about how did the rule set get to look how it looked, and have a chance to review the changes that you've seen since the last version you saw at our 6th meeting. So we're going to reground ourselves in reminding what is the role and purpose of rules. Then there's going to be a discussion to share with you about what kinds of revisions do you see in the rule set. And Alyssa Chatterjee and Serena, I realize I don't know how to pronounce Serena's last name, is going to speak with us about things that they're considering and the value that they really have in the input that you've given that they want to impact broader at their early learning division. Katrina and her partners at Trauma Informed Oregon are going to talk about next steps. And then we wanted to do a quick breakout group check-in with all of you. And then we'll close you and really thank you for coming back and doing this 7th meeting with all of us. Okay. Katrina?
Thanks, Carrie. And yes, I want to echo what you said. It feels good to see this group pulled back together again. So I wanted to highlight a couple of folks. I'm going to start with Mandy, actually, because she is the one of these 3 folks that are actually on the call. So Mandy is the executive director at Trauma Informed Oregon. Dahlia Avelo was not able to be here today. She's shuttling kids, which I think all of us who work in early childhood understand the importance of kids. But Mandy, would you want to say anything sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll talk more later, but hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here for a moment. Dahlia is taking kids to back to school night, and I'll be doing the same in a few hours. So thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you for joining us. And then the other person, Giovanna Giles, is she was planning to be here today, but is a little bit under the weather at the moment. These unexpected things when you start new jobs and things like that. But Giovanna is a research analyst who's joined the Early Learning Division specifically to support the suspension and expulsion prevention program. And we are thrilled to have her as a part of the team. So Hadia has been a person that many of us have known. I only had the privilege of getting to know Hadia in the last few years. And there are people here who have had a close relationship with Hadia over many years and who've been influenced by Hadia in so many ways. And if you haven't heard, she passed away a little over a week ago on, I believe, Sunday, the 11th. And we just wanted to, Hadia was a member of the RAC, although she ended up being unable to actually participate in our meetings. But she has been incredibly influential across early childhood systems, and specifically in the realm of suspension and expulsion prevention. And she thought of working to support, to prevent suspension and expulsion as a revolution. And I love that. And I really want to honor that legacy and to carry her work forward as a part of this program. She was an educator to many children, but also to many early childhood educators. She has touched so many people in that way. She's a determined and passionate advocate. She's funny. She had such an amazing laugh. She's inspiring. And, you know, as I have talked with people since her passing, the word that keeps coming up over and over and over again is the word amazing. She was amazing. And she was incredibly influential. So we'll pause for a moment and also give space if there's anybody that would like to say a few words about your relationship or your experience with Hadia. We want to take space for that. We won't have enough time for everybody to say something. Leslie, I see your hand.
I'll need to leave my camera off for a moment while I say this.
Yeah.
The word that's missing on here is friend.
Mm.
And she was my real friend. And then she was an inspiration to me because as a Black budding leader, I didn't know I was a leader at the time. I got to see someone that I connected with in a way that made me see myself in a new way. And all of the initiatives and things that I've worked on to finally get to live out this work with her was an amazing pinnacle of my whole entire career. And she encouraged me to take the role that I'm in now currently. Kind of was like, girl, if you don't apply for that, in that way. And so I will say that we have lost someone who I was a fangirl of and got to become very close with over the years. So there's a hole in my heart that won't be filled. And I will say that I did send an email. And I don't know if it's possible, but I want to say on record that I recommended that this bill be changed to her name so her legacy lives on forever. I don't know if that's possible, but I want to say in front of you all today that is a hope for me to have that happen. There will be other ways in which she'll be memorialized. I'll say one more thing. One will be a scholarship named after her that we will pay with Preschool for All dollars. And so, yeah, my friend, my inspiration, fan for life.
Thank you, Leslie. I have no idea if it's possible to name such things after people, but I love the idea.
I wrote the legislature already in the House. So
Excellent.
I would also like to recognize Hadia's work and how it has influenced myself as well. And I know I'm not, as I've known her as a professor first, and then as a mentor, and then as a colleague. I mean, I would share those share the same feeling that Leslie just did in being able to do this work with her. I know that she has influenced, I would say, the Hadia generation of early educators in Oregon. There's I know a lot of her teachings, a lot of her, just the way about her, I have tried to emulate and share with others. And she's had a large, unmistakable influence on my professional career, on my personal career, and my family life as well. And to honor her is to keep this work, keep the momentum for this work. She has worked very hard and taken a lot of has gone through a lot to get us to this point. So I look forward to continuing her work and honoring that person that she is.
Thank you, Dominic. And thank you all for being partners in this work, whether you knew Hadia or not. Being here as a part of this meeting, all of the meetings that you've shown up to, and ongoing, like that is about, it's about the work that Hadia was passionate about. It's about the work that all of us are carrying forward together.
Can I share as well?
Sure.
Thanks. Hi everybody, I'm Amy. I think one thing I didn't get to tell Hadia, I kept making a mental note to tell her is that, you know, on the bill work, like I saw her stick herself out there and do something new, and she kept doing something that was new for her. And I saw how she talked about her own racial experience. And there were some times at work when I was nervous to talk about mine, but I remembered how she would, talking to legislators or whoever, like she would share. And it kind of made me think, like, okay, like, Amy, you can too. Like, you can talk about your own racial experience and how it shows up. And she like set an example for me about how to do that. So yeah, that was just a really important point in my learning about like how she kept like doing new things and kept teaching along the way. That was a big thing I learned from Hadia.
Thank you, Amy. I think we need to probably move on. As much as, I mean, we could spend probably the next hour talking about Hadia or longer. But feel free to add, yes, like Karina and Meredith, feel free to add comments and memories in the chat as we go along.
I'm covering this. Thank you, everyone. It was just beautiful to hear. And I was just taking in those words, Amy and Leslie and Dominic. For our facilitation principles, we really just want to kind of highlight these again to get us on that cadence that we are very familiar with for the last 6 meetings, and just centering ourselves again in hope, in honoring our collective wisdom, and centering equity, and in that discomfort, and always prioritizing safety. And then as well as our group agreements, which we'll just kind of give folks a few seconds to glance at, just to kind of recall what we as a collective group agreed to practice and center as part of this RAC. And with that, we'll go ahead and transition on to the meat of the work. I don't know, it's the best word I can come up with right now. So Katrina, I think you'll be reviewing a timeline with us.
Yes, thank you, Karina. Yeah, I'm not sure what the right word is there, but something else. So this timeline is just a very broad kind of like a long-term picture. It was in July 2021. I'm pretty sure it was July. I know it was 2021 when the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 2166 and Senate Bill 236, which are really what brings us here today and is the momentum, one of the momentums for this work. So from March till now of this year, the program actually was funded through House Bill 2020. It's not 2022, it's 2052 or 5202. Sorry, I have my number wrong there. Staff was actually hired. That's me. I actually started at the end of March. And then we convened the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, round 1. And now next week, we will present the rules that we've been working on to the Early Learning Council for adoption. And that is sort of like the first big chapter of getting this whole program off the ground. And I know it can't go fast enough. It goes slow and it can't go fast enough. And yet it also is going going fast. There's been a lot of work to get to this point. So from October and ongoing, there is going to be we'll hear more about it. Mandy will share more about it with us a little bit later, but a lot of community engagement around program design. We're going to be having an RFA process to identify regional service providers. We'll get those contracts executed, and then we're anticipating that program services will begin around June 2023. During that summer, we will also reconvene the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. And it will be, so what we'll do is remember, well, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but remember, we're not submitting the requirement for providers to access the program supports now. We're waiting until we have the program supports in place. So that will be the second time we come back around. We'll be able to, there'll be, a bunch of things there. And then 2023 to 2026, program implementation continues, and it's going to be this iterative process. So we we will get services started, but we're also going to be having that kind of ongoing process of program development. Just when we push it out the door the first time doesn't mean it's going to be a finished product. We'll keep working at it. We'll eventually have a rulemaking advisory number 3, round 3, to identify rules that are related to the ban on suspension and expulsion that goes into effect in 2026. So that's just a kind of overall timeline. And then we are also currently in the process of contracting with a couple of researchers, one national researcher and one local researcher who is a person of color, to conduct an in-depth study on the use of suspension and expulsion in Oregon and practices that prevent suspension and expulsion. We want to get some idea of what's working so that we can build on that.
One of the things that we wanted to do today is reground ourselves in the purpose of rules. So as you have the discussion about what has been changed, we can kind of remind ourselves, because I don't think rules is naturally for most of us in our everyday work a natural thing and a very legal document. So we wanted to kind of review for all of our sakes that the statute that was passed holds ELD accountable for implementing the expulsion and suspension prevention program with the goals that it iterated in statute. The rules that we're discussing today are to hold the constituents accountable and dictate how the money will be used. So this is the rules to launch the program, and then and the ability for ELD to get the money to the people who will be delivering the services. So the rules are the legal framework that get the program off the ground, and that rules, by being a legal document, are difficult to change and do not allow for flexibility or responsiveness. So one of the things that has to be weighed is what's important to be in rules to kind of guide, and that is often not changed, or if it's changed, it's usually years in between changes. And then what kinds of things have been developed or informed by this rules committee, but really belong in other places that are more flexible and more responsive. So as you do the process of rolling out the programs and get feedback from providers and families, that there's an ability and a flexibility to change things and be highly responsive. And that the definitions in this rule will only pertain to the expulsion and suspension prevention program. So Early Learning Division had to also weigh is some of the input that you gave them, they would actually like to apply beyond this program and more broadly at Early Learning Division, or what things were defined or discussed by this rule committee that really should pertain only to the expulsion and suspension prevention program. So what Remy and Katrina are going to do is they're going to tag team and review the changes that happened, I believe, from what you saw at the 6th meeting to what was sent out for comment.
Hey, I'm Remy Watts. You probably know me as your rule coordinator. And just really quick, if anyone has any questions about what rules are, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we can answer them. I know that rules are, I've been in this position for 3 years and I'm still learning more and more about rules every single day. So I don't expect anyone here to have like fully comprehensive grasp on what rules are, especially because I don't, and my title is rule coordinator. Anyway, feel free to drop questions in the chat and I'll respond to them. So we're just going to go a little bit quickly through some of these rule changes. We do have our early learning system director, Alyssa Chatterjee, and our deputy director, Chief of Programs, Serena Studemeyer, joining pretty soon. And we're really excited to have them talk to you about the impacts of this rulemaking advisory committee. But first, some of the changes that you'll see in the version of the rule set that we noticed publicly, we have removed 2 sections entirely. So the first one is the requirements for early care and education providers. We are removing them for now because we don't have a program to give supports to providers yet. So why would we require providers to access a program that they can't? So that rule is being put off until we have our regional service providers operating throughout the state. So we're looking towards next year, about this time next year, when we would be instituting those requirements, anticipated, might I say. Let's see. So the second section that we removed is the funding section. So we at the Early Learning Division are transitioning into the Department of Early Learning and Care, and we are learning more and more about how to create procurement functions that serve us and do not bind us. And unknowingly, this rule may have caused us some issues in getting money out the door to regional service providers to provide those services. So in order to just create an easier procurement process, this doesn't need to be in rule. So we removed it just so we don't hit any sort of barriers that would prevent us from getting money out the door quickly in the future. And once again, if there are any questions about anything we're talking about, drop them in the chat and we will answer them to the best of our ability, which I hope would be good.
Thanks, Remy. Let's see, I think we skipped something. Did you do that on purpose, Carrie? Oh, maybe it's out of order. There we go. So I see that Alyssa and Serena have joined us. So I'm going to go over this one, and then I think we'll kind of transition to a little bit different order so we can take advantage of their time with us. But this is one of the pieces we added a definition for supported break. This was in response to feedback from this group and from other feedback from the public about, yeah, it's developmentally appropriate sometimes for kids to need a break outside of the environment or outside of an activity. And so we wanted to define something that would hold a space for that and not be an in-program suspension. So that's the idea behind this. Yeah. So let's see, Carrie and Remy, should we jump ahead at this point?
Yeah, I think this actually might be a good way to transition into our conversation with Alyssa and Serena. We haven't gotten to the information that Alyssa and Serena are here to talk about, which is you will see some change in definitions, and we wanted to illustrate why that was happening and how this RACS conversation is actually going to be impacting DELC as a whole and not necessarily just this program. And that's why we thought it would be important to have Alyssa and Serena here, the Early Learning System Director, and then also our Chief of Programs, come and explain the true impact that this RAC conversation has had on the implementation of DELC. And with that, Alyssa.
Thank you. Be honest, I'm multitasking with some media requests, so let me just tell my comments first. Hold on. Um, uh, Thank you. So my name is Alyssa Chatterjee, and I'm the Early Learning System Director with the Early Learning Division. And I first just wanted to really appreciate the time you all have dedicated to this. This Rulemaking Advisory Committee has lasted far longer than most. It's involved so much deep engagement and work, and it really is a model that we hope to be able to replicate across other Rulemaking Advisory Committees. So I first just wanted to thank you for that. You've stuck with this, you've continued to stay engaged, and we know how dry or tedious rulemaking can feel, and it's so clear that you understand the power of rules. And so just wanted to kind of start with that appreciation. One of the things that this really incredible work did is it really caused us to start thinking about what it is that we want to be accountable to as an agency. How do we want to operationalize anti-racist policies across more than just suspension and expulsion prevention program? And one of the things that we've been looking at, and I'll invite Serena to jump in here as well, as we've talked with the Department of Administrative Services, the statewide Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Action Plan, is how can this inform our work as an agency? So some of these terms like anti-racist, implicit bias, we really want to make sure can both continue to evolve as those definitions evolve and as we learn more about those concepts, and that we can apply them really beyond just suspension, expulsion, prevention. And I think one of the things we've found, as Remy mentioned, as we're becoming our own agency, we found there's some things in rule that are actually making it harder for us to serve community the way that we're being asked to serve community. And so the downside of rule is you have that rigidity, right? It's the greatest strength is its greatest weakness. There is power in codifying some terms in rule, and there's limitations in doing so as well, because it's much harder to have that responsiveness. I think another great example is the term stakeholder was used so much at the start of the pandemic. We now are so much more aware of the problematic history about that term. But that term was like, oh my gosh, we're talking about stakeholders. We're acknowledging that there's people that we're serving that we should be talking about. And in the last 2 years, that term is not the term that we should be using. So one of the things that we would like to do is we would like to pull some of those terms like anti-racist, implicit bias out as we're assembling a glossary of equity terms that all of our programs will have to adhere to, and that all of our processes, policies, and procedures would have to adhere to, so that we can continue to work with you and other partners to add definitions, to refine those definitions, and modernize those definitions over time without having to be tied to the Early Learning Council, which would really be in alignment with kind of best practices and approaches and sort of that continuing evolution of equity and diversity, equity, inclusion. But I'll pause and let my colleague Serena kind of talk a little bit more about what this could look like.
Yes, thank you, Alyssa. And again, I'll introduce myself, Serena Stoudemire Wesley, Deputy Director and Chief of Programs, wearing 2 hats as always. And it was really important that when we see a lot of those terms, like we're overusing them at times, and they change like every 2 years, terms change. So every 2 years we'd be going in front of the rules, trying to change rules. So I'm in the process of creating a glossary of terms, and I just sent it to Sherry today, who's beautifying it because that's not my lane, to make it look well, but also adding some terms that are more geared toward education. So I come from DAS, which was the statewide. And so I've taken those that we created as we were building the DEI action plan, and also from some of the other agencies who currently have that. So ODOT currently has glossary of terms and equity foundation. So that's where we're getting here. And that's what I'm working on right now. Here. And so it's in the process. We should have the glossary of terms to you to review in draft before, by month's end. And so that we can have, what are some of the terms that we're missing that are intentionally geared toward education, because I don't have all those. And it's not up to me to really just develop on all, but take a little piece here and a little piece there. I've taken from Portland Community College. I've taken from Portland State. I've taken from our DEI statewide action plan and a plethora of other places as we're building those glossary of terms. But it's also important to know that we don't want to whitewash anything. We want to be intentional about the work that we're doing going forward. And we want to be intentional about who we're working with, who our providers are, who our families are as we're going forward. And we don't want to have a check in the box, and we also don't want to be performative, because we know that we want to make it clear that our work and our investments have to reflect equity in it as we're centering equity and the work that we're doing going forward. And we also have to make sure that it's sustainable. So when we're gone, when one of us are gone and we're no longer here, I know Remy says she's going to be here forever. When I talked to her, she said she should be here. But when she's here, we know that that is here, and we know that we're going to be updating every 2 to 3 years as our terms change. So that's the work that we're doing. That's the work that's being done currently. And again, we'll have it to you as soon as possible. We will not send out or do anything until we get your buy-in and you take a look at those terms and add to it if I've missed anything. And I know it's a short time, it's a short turnaround period, but I feel like I'm running behind the curve. I'm not hitting that 8 ball to get things out. And so to make sure that we get it done right the first time too, as well, it's really important.
And Leslie, yes, NACI, absolutely. They've done so much work on equity in early childhood. So we'll definitely make sure that that's incorporated and referenced. So just to kind of, put it together, we're talking about the importance of broadening these definitions and taking them, really taking what this RAC has created and lifting them really out of rule and into this glossary as part of broader expectations for the agency and for all of our programs in our administration. And so, the power of this committee has really shined such a light on the need for us to have that strong early childhood component within our equity lens, and to take this opportunity as we're becoming a new agency to define this across the board. So I just want to thank you again for prompting that reflection and for providing really such thoughtful and in-depth reflection on what these terms need to be responsive to and considerate of.
And I just want to add one more thing too. In creating this work, in creating our foundation for early learning and in creating our glossary of terms, to understand it's about system change. Because we can change terms and we can change programs, but once we change the system, that's what's sustainable. And we know that's going to continue to go on. If we don't change our system and structures, then they just go back, right? So we're looking at sustainable system change. And what does that look like in the long run? And how does it look as we're starting to move this work forward?
Thank you, both of you. And Serena, I think one piece that I was just really struck by in your comments was sometimes I think of a glossary as this very static document, and that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about something that is a living document to be updated and revised, and that it is not just, again, like the dictionary that sits on the shelf, but it's something that's an active tool to be used in everything.
Right. Because as Alyssa said, we were using the term stakeholder. Well, we should be using the term partner. And I know even for myself, as I'm continuing on this journey, equity is a journey. DEI, justice, social journey, it's a journey that we're all on, and it never stops. It's ever evolving. And I remember I used to use the term low-hanging fruit. I don't use that term anymore because of the connotations that goes along with it. So it's a matter of every 10 years, what they say, there's a paradigm shift. But really our terms change every 2 years as as we just went through the social justice movement. A lot of things change. A lot of things that we were talking about has changed. So we have to be able to change and adapt to what's going on. And we have to change and adapt to our families. Our families are no longer the families of 10 years ago or 20 years ago. They're totally different. So what does that look like? And we just can't look at it as one individual, because there's more than one story. I can never pronounce her name right, but it's Chemi Manda, whatever. But you know what I'm saying. She has a TED Talk. It's called One Story. And that was her learning experience, because we hear one story when we need to hear several stories that are attached to one person. And what does that look like? And I will share that TED Talk with you all too, so you can really understand what I'm talking about. Because sometimes we come into a situation and we just hear this one story. And then once we get into it, we find that there's so much more to that story that's going on. And so we want to be that flexible, where our learning is always flexible. What we're doing is always flexible as we're going along. Thank you, Remy.
Remy's always on it.
So Alyssa and Serena, do you still have a few minutes that we can kind of open it up for questions or comments from folks?
Absolutely.
Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I really am like the language that I'm hearing as far as when we're talking about influencing and really changing systems, right? And I know that you've also mentioned that, the goal is to put this into work so that it's sustainable. And when I think about that sustainability piece, I just think about supports around engaging in these types of conversations, supports around providing those supports to those who, maybe will start these conversations, but may get, isolated in some ways as the organization grows into, grows in, it sounds like a shift in culture. And I just would encourage to have supports in place also as we're looking at that sustainability, but also for those that are engaging in active change within the organization. I think about them and supporting those, because as we know, change is it can be challenging, and there's a lot of feelings involved. And I think with this type of change, there can be moments of feelings of isolation, and that's where it stops becoming, that's where the momentum stops. So thinking about that, what types of supports will be available along the way.
I thank you for that. Thank you for that question and your recommendation and your comment. I think it's really important that we don't leave anyone out. And so for me, I'm a collaborator. And into doing this work and moving things forward, we can't afford to do that because it's going to take all of us to be involved. And I would hope that if anyone feels left out, that you can pick up the phone, call me, text me, use any mode of communication to let me know that. And I want to make sure that everyone's at the table. It's about not othering, but it's about belonging. How are we making sure that we make everyone feel like they belong and they have a voice to be at the table? You can't have access and not hear everybody's voice at the table, because it just doesn't work. So when we're talking about access, we're making sure that everybody has access. So it's not just bringing you to the table, but I want to hear what you're saying. I just don't want to listen. I really want to hear it. And how do we make sure that we embed it into the work that we're doing going forward? We know that the kids that we're serving are over 40%, 50% kids of color. We want to make sure that we don't leave anyone out, whether you're under-resourced or underrepresented. We know the history of Oregon, and so we know that leaving folks out does not work. It has been my career has been in cultural change, DEI, social justice, all of those things. I've come from a nonprofit to profit and to state government. And I have always been to make sure that I include everyone. I know Sam Brooks from Awami says, everyone in, no one's out. And that's exactly true. We can't leave anyone out. So it doesn't matter the color of your skin or who you are. Again, our families are changed. And so we have to do better, and we have to be different and doing it differently, and also working outside the box to do that work.
Thank you for your response. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I look forward to getting to know you better too.
Hi, Alyssa and Serena. This is Marcia from Douglas County Family Development Center. We're a relief nursery. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your commitment to not only making, supporting us with these changes, but really having some teeth to look at what do our future generations of children deserve, and how do we level that playing field? And I'm just really proud to be involved with all the wonderful people that have helped and supported this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time. And we are, I think, obviously many other agencies are further along in their agencydom than us, right? We're technically not even our own entity yet. And I think we are trying to take this opportunity to start as DELP with equity at the foundation, but we're also so lucky as a part of the Department of Education because they're being very intentional with how can they create internal structures and protocols that are not easily dismantled, even if there's a change in leadership and administration. And that's what we're really trying to do, recognizing that there's power in the flexibility and evolution, and there's risk. And there are other ways, Dominic, to your point, where we can establish those supports and those internal mechanisms to make it pretty hard to eradicate and to really embed in our culture so that it doesn't come down to one or two key leadership positions, but it's an expectation that we all hold ourselves to.
Right.
Anyone else?
Can I just add one more thing? I don't want to be a talking head, but I do want to add one more thing. And to that end, I just think it's also, as we're doing this work, that we're intentional and we're calling it and we're naming it too as we're going forward, because I think that's really important, that we're intentional about who we're talking about when we're talking about our communities, when we're talking about our families and our kids. And I just want to keep that in the forefront of your minds too as well, that let's be intentional about who we're talking about and naming it as we're going forward.
Thank you, Serena. Carrie, I'm wondering about putting that slide up again while Alyssa and Serena are still here, so that the group can kind of see which are those definitions that we are that we're talking about. I should say on this list, culturally specific organization is coming out simply because it's not used in the rule set. It has a slightly different rationale on that one compared to the others.
Katrina, to clarify then, if as we're kind of doing, we know this is sort of the initial rule set and more will come, culturally specific organization may come in a later rule set.
Yes, and actually the definition that we were using for culturally specific organization exists in the rule set for the equity fund.
Just a quick note on rules best practice. If the term doesn't exist in the rule set anywhere, then you don't define it. But as Katrina just said, it is very much defined in the Early Childhood Equity Fund rule set.
So I just wanted to clarify with this particular slide, the words that are listed there will not be in the rule set, but we will see them in regards to suspension and expulsion outside of the rule set within contracts and whatnot. So will these terms mean the same thing within both contexts? Okay.
Yeah, and Dominic, that's where what we will do once we have this glossary of terms codified, again, as an ever evolving document, we would make sure that these terms, when they're in the grant agreements, program manuals, or training, would be consistent, whether we're talking about training for suspension and expulsion prevention or training for preschool promise or OPK. So that's how we ensure that consistency as well.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to jump in and say what a great idea. I remember doing work and everyone had their own definition of stuff, even at the work within ELD at the time. And so I think this is going to be super helpful for everyone. So I'm glad to see you guys are taking that on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, for, I know this was not originally on your calendars. So thank you for creating this space in your day, in your week to come and join us.
Happy to. And we've seen so much incredible work produced, and we've just heard what an amazing experience this has been for our staff who've been involved. So again, just really appreciate everybody's commitment and the feedback and reflection. And I'm really excited that even though this RAC might be concluding, I'm hoping that we've built, those relationships and that access that we can continue to leverage your wisdom and knowledge, and you can continue to tell us where we have those opportunities for improvement and growth.
Anything else for Alyssa or Serena before we let them get on with the rest of whatever's on their calendar? On speed dial.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. And again, I am an open book. You can call me anytime.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. So let's jump back to the slides.
I think we're on young child right now. So after that, very good diversion with Serena and Alyssa. And I really, truly hope that everyone understands the impact that this RAC had, much larger scope than just the rule set, truly. And so just hopping back, we're going micro again. We just had a macro conversation, and let us zoom back in. I'm sorry to do this to everyone. It's not as fun. But here we go. So just going back to some of the changes that you're going to see, we're going to the definition of young child. So we added young child to the list of definitions that pertain to this rule set to mean a child who is not yet eligible to attend kindergarten in a public school. We wanted to clarify what this entire rule set, which age group this entire rule set actually applied to, and with the kind of a child who is not yet eligible to attend kindergarten in a public school, we're trying to capture children who may not go to kindergarten at age 5, potentially trying to include children who may have some sort of barrier into getting into kindergarten and need a little bit of extra support. And I guess we'll go to the next slide, which is you, Katrina.
Yes, so thank you, Remy. So we have in conversation, we've decided we would like to add a definition for planned transition, but we didn't have enough time. By the time that this really came kind of front and center in our planning, we didn't have enough time to have a rules advisory process around the definition. So we will revisit this in the next round of rulemaking, but just to note that this was based on feedback that we heard from you and also other public feedback about, again, sometimes there are reasons why children need to transition from one program to another that should not count as expulsion. Yeah.
And once again, feel free to drop questions into the chat. We're happy to answer. This one is a little bit more technical. We've got the regional service providers, which are going to be the entities that are actually providing the preventive services to our child early care and education providers statewide. When we first wrote this rule, we were modeling it after some other rules that we have in the early learning division breadth of rulemaking, but we kind of were going at it from we wanted to go at it from a slightly different angle. So instead of listing the providers that are eligible to apply as a regional service provider, we're going to put those eligible entities within the application, where just in case we forget someone, we can add it back really easily, and changed the rules to hold regional service providers to a standard that all services are accessible to all populations within the region, especially those most disproportionately impacted, as well as requiring our regional service providers to collaborate with and coordinate services with technical assistance providers. So more so holding them accountable to the actions rather than who's eligible to apply to be a regional service provider.
All right, so inclusion. I am not going to read the whole thing. The basic point I want to make with this one is it was rewritten. We heard feedback. Meredith Valines shared with us, and then the group, the RAC, at our last meeting really like loudly said yes, Meredith, you're right. So we worked hard to update this definition to take out the word regardless. So instead of it saying regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, etc. And surprisingly to me, it took us several hours to come up with how else do you say this? Because we couldn't say inclusive of, because we're defining inclusion. So, but thanks to Remy had the brilliance to see the other way. Right, yes, so modest, Remy. Remy had the brilliance to see how else it could be rewritten. So it's just a few sentences were just kind of the order of things was changed. All right, suspension. This is, so the thing that was the big change here, well, a couple big changes to this definition. One is it was rewritten to avoid using the term remove. So we removed remove. And this was new information for me, but what I understand is that the term remove really has a lot of juvenile justice connotations that may have more of an like aggressive type removal than we want to embed in this language. And so I believe that the content of these definitions maintains that the integrity of the content is there, but it is worded slightly differently. The other thing that we did is we had a clause about removing, or excuse me, there I am using that word, about suspending a child due to behavior. And we have taken out that clause. There was the RAC had a lot of conversation around this. There was suggestion to remove the clause altogether. There was also suggestion to specify that it's due to child's behavior rather than family behavior. We had so many conversations also internally at the ELD about this. And what we ended up doing is deciding to remove that clause, because what that does is it, among other things, it doesn't mean that we can't revisit it later, but for now, what that does is it keeps for the study that we're going to do on suspension and expulsion, it will allow us to capture any reason that a child is being suspended, whether it is perceived as being about the child's behavior or perceived as about family behavior or whatever it may be. So again, there's time and space to come back and revisit this. But for now, we wanted to really keep it open. Yeah, Leslie.
Just a quick comment about that, because I understand what you're saying as the reason why, but I think if it's not attached to something, then people won't know what they're doing. Like, because if someone doesn't pay me, I'm not going to say that's a suspension. So you're not going to capture that reason, right? So I just want to question that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there will also be some when we work on the section related to requirements for early childhood providers. There's some space in there to also be more specific about kind of what type of scenarios is it that you need to contact the suspension and expulsion prevention program for, and what is like due to non-payment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because I'm thinking about language right now. You have to post in a licensed facility where it says, Office of Child Care does not intervene in payment matters. So it's very clear in a written policy, outward facing to families, what it isn't going to cover. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Zakia.
I just have a comment. So when you say there's going to be clear terms for providers to know when they should and shouldn't reach out to for extra help, right? That's understood. But what about when parents try to weaponize this bill or this rule because they didn't pay or because they were disrespectful, whatever? Since there's no clear definition of why this would come into place, then that's just giving parents even more tools to harm businesses unjustly as a provider.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. I think there's a couple of different things, that go through my head. One is, let's say that happens with a parent, and the parent calls the warm line to say this provider is going to expel my child. Whoever is the person who's responding to that is going to be asking questions to understand the situation. And if it becomes that the parent is not paying the provider, that's an entirely different type of situation than a child that is exhibiting challenging behaviors. So that's one level. And then the other, I think, it is about kind of really wrestling with the next section that we're going to come back to, the provider requirement section. And I think that's also part of the reason why we're delaying it, not just because the services haven't been developed, but because we need more time to think through what should those requirements look like. And I think, like, if I think about an old-fashioned dictionary sitting on my shelf, the definition just tells us,
come here, baby,
what this thing is. It just defines the word, but it doesn't say what the situations are in which the word is used. And so I think about that with this definition. We're defining suspension. We aren't defining in this term what the rules are about when and where it can, can't, shouldn't be used. Does that make sense?
It's not a clear definition because parents are already using the number to call and report abuse and neglect. They're already weaponizing that against providers just because they're upset because they got removed or the provider's not changing everything about their program to accommodate that one family or whatever the case may be. There's so many complaints that providers get, and now they have to go through a whole process of proving themselves innocent, because in the state of Oregon, if a parent calls, you're guilty and until proven innocent. And so we want to, as we're looking at this, we want to make sure that it is very clear that this is due to the child's behavior. It's going to scare off a lot of providers. You're going to start seeing doors get closed with all of these rules that are not being more clear for parents, because everybody does not have the intellect that all the people in this group have to understand that this is just due. We're trying to make sure that children that are having some challenges are protected. Everybody don't have that comprehension skills. So therefore, things need to be extremely transparent down to second grader reading level. Don't leave things out in the atmosphere. That's just going to create more problems for providers.
Yeah, thank you. And I would love to have some ongoing conversation with you on this as we work through these issues kind of over time. Remy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just I wanted, Zakia, I totally hear everything you're saying, and you're totally right as well, by the way. And I just wanted to provide just a tiny bit more context. First of all, the ban from the Senate Bill 236 ban on suspension and expulsion isn't going to go through until 2026. So we have plenty of time to get this right. And part of the reason that we are choosing to be a little bit vague right now and then hone in on the different requirements of different situations where providers have to call the suspension and expulsion prevention program is to build up that study so we can create that definition, create that nuance that you want. So we're really looking towards this study that we're contracting out in order to really inform that rule language that we're going to have to put in place in 2026 to conform with that ban. If that makes sense. So I totally hear all of your concerns and worries, and I really hope that you're going to continue giving us feedback as we move towards 2026 so that we can get the language right the first time. So does that help add any clarity to what you're talking about?
Thank you. Sure. Yes.
Thank you. Keep being involved. Thank you.
All right, expulsion and soft expulsion. Expulsion was also rewritten to remove the word remove. And soft expulsion was just edited around some clarity and readability. That's one that the RAC had said, what? I have to read that like 3 times to be able to make sense of that. So, and I'm realizing I completely forgot to introduce, I'm not sure if she's still here, Kayla Weststein. I think Kayla maybe had to leave.
I told her she could leave. Katrina, that's my fault.
No worries. I meant to introduce Kayla. She has been a key person in helping us think through the technical and legal impact of when we say one word versus another. And she also was able to help rewrite soft expulsion. That's why she came to mind now in a way that feels more readable. All right, let's go on to the next one because I want to make sure I know that Dominic, her name is Kayla Weststein. Am I pronouncing her last name correctly, Remy?
It's Weststein.
Weststein.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she is policy writer, rule writer extraordinaire.
All right, we actually covered this slide with Alyssa and Serena. I thought we had one more before then. So let's go, to that one. And then after this slide, I am going to turn it over to Mandy Davis to give us an update and share some information about engagement. So you probably have also, after that, then we're going to have a chance for some breakout groups to just kind of like debrief and process everything that we just ran through. So these are rough timelines, as everything is in these types of programs. But roughly in the coming 3 months and then ongoing, there'll be significant community engagement, and we'll hear about that from Mandy over the next. And when I say next, it's next from now, not next after the 3 months first listed. So in the coming 6 to 9 months, we're going to be doing a lot of work to develop our equity-centered program guidelines and materials. A lot of that, there'll be a lot of conversations, community conversations that inform that, a lot of work that goes into that. But all of that, part of creating a new program is creating all of those, thinking through all of those things. And then in the next kind of 3 to 9 months, we'll have an RFA process to solicit applications from organizations that would like to be providers of infant and early childhood mental health consultation in their region. There's the procurement process at ODE and ELD is slow, and so the timing exactly on this it remains to be seen, but it will be coming with the goal of having in the summer of 2023 that those regional service providers will begin either there's kind of two options. Either begin providing those mental health consultation services, or some regions may end up applying for and being granted a planning grant to ensure they have the infrastructure for equity-centered mental health consultation services. And as we have shared before, the suspension and expulsion prevention program is not just about mental health consultation. And the thing about mental health consultation is that we have not had access statewide. So we are in this push to create access to mental health consultation. We're also going to come up with another name as I see Leslie come back on camera. I think about that. But we want to come up with a program name. So we're creating this new thing. And so there's a lot of, you hear a lot of talking about mental health consultation. But now and ongoing into the future, we're also doing work to see where can we embed and strengthen practices that prevent suspension and expulsion throughout the early learning system, in coaching, professional development, other forms of technical assistance. So that is, we probably don't talk about that as much or as loudly, but it's definitely, those are definitely conversations that are happening. There's also going to be a process, which I realize I didn't get on this slide, is of helping regions. To helping might be the wrong term. We're going to support regions to have conversations together about how triage happens when a request for support comes in for a child at risk of suspension or expulsion. Who's the best person to respond, or what organization is the best role to respond? So that's just kind of a rough outline of kind of where we're headed in the shorter term and the longer term. And, even like I said before, even when we get the services started, we'll still be learning, growing, changing. It's going to be one of those things that we do as well as we can when we push it out, and we will quickly learn, as we always do. where are the things that we didn't think through, and then we'll make adjustments and keep working at it, keep growing to get a really strong program that really supports kids and supports the providers that are supporting the kids. All right, so I am going to now toss it to Mandy. Did somebody say something? No. Okay, maybe it was you, Mandy.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to do this thing that we do at Trauma Informed Oregon and ask for an emoji check. So you can pick any emoji you want. I won't judge you, but can you just give me like, you're here, hands up, thumbs, smiles, all the things. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Because, relationship is all about the work, and we have to figure out ways to do that in these virtual spaces. So for those who don't know me, my name is Mandy Davis. I'm Director of Trauma Informed Oregon. I'm standing in for Dahlia, which is impossible if you know Dahlia. So I do have her voice in my head, probably texting me at the same time. But as we said at the beginning, Dahlia's out with parent night at schools. So I'm the Director of Trauma from Oregon. I have been doing this work with Trauma from Oregon since it was inception in 2016. I've been in Oregon for 21 years, and we're grounded at Portland State University. And I only say all that to say that just super big thank you for all you stepping into this work. I've been on these rules committee. They can be really challenging, and wordsmithing can feel really hard, and it's actually really it's what makes organizational change happen and sustain it. So just really kudos for your service and that. Words matter. I also want to tell you that we have 3 pages of how to define trauma, because words across culture and language don't mean the same thing, right? And so I just appreciate your work around, and you're working with the different words you're trying to use, because we have found that we need 15 usually in every conversation to talk about what we do. Also a shout out to ELD that you now have a new acronym. Did I hear DELC? Did I hear it's already got a sound to it? So
it's already got a sound to it.
Yep. I know. So I'm excited for all of that. And I know many of you in this room, so I'm grateful to be here. So I'm also laughing. Well, I should say, I'm also just want to put into the room that Hadia was a dear friend of mine and dear friend of Trauma Informed Oregon's. And, she came here to get training one time, and we got trained very quickly by Hadia, and worked together in the culturally specific trauma world together. And so I think someone said, what should we call this, Leslie? It should be the Hadia, should be the Hadia project. Let's go for it. And we are support that in all ways. And I have a picture of her because she's on our website to keep me honest and focused in the work. And so I'm going to talk really briefly about kind of our plan. And I say our plan because Dahlia has spent a lot of time in this work, and we're talking to you all. And we really were grappling with how do we, because our job is to help kind of design this thing so that Zakia, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but what you said is so important. And so that we really hold all of that information in a way that before we step up things, we step them up in the right way or make some good recommendations that are informed. Trauma Informed Oregon is here doing this because we kind of did this with Trauma Informed Care. So I just want you to know, we also had a policy that went out to providers, and providers were like, wait a minute. So we really spent a lot of time trying to think about how do you make good practice sometimes turns into bad policy, and good policy sometimes turns into bad practice. And so how do we actually spend the time to make good practice and good policy come together in the right way? So what we're going to be doing over the next 2 months pretty intensely, and I'm laughing right now because since language was such a part of this conversation today, Dahlia and I were like, bottom up does not feel like the right language, but she was like racing out the door. I'm like, oh. So you could just laugh at us for using bottom up strategy. Well, it dawned on me, maybe we kept trying to think of a better one. Maybe it should be flip the triangle, because educators really like triangles. So that's not true for all sectors, by the way. So we should flip the triangle, might be the better method here. But to give you a really quick, and I say quick, we will always we do nothing but love to hear your feedback, and we will look for your feedback along the way of both the method as well as the questions we're asking. But the reason we're saying flip the triangle is what we really want to start with after listening to enough of, so Dahlia hearing, kind of being in these spaces. And some of the things you all have already mentioned is that we really want to go after, here's the policy. And then we really want to sit with so what are your concerns? What are your fears? What does this need to look like differently than what's been done before in the state of Oregon around technical assistance and support? So what we want to do, and Dahlia's got a, if you, again, you know, Dahlia, she's got a better image, you know, more detailed image that she can walk you through, but we really want, what we mean by flipping the triangle is we wanted to start with providers. So we want to talk to providers across the state in different multi-roles, so owners as well as teachers. We want to talk to administrators, teachers' aides, and really hear, when you look at this policy and these kind of, what's going to be happening, what are your concerns, what are your thoughts, what do you already know, what should happen? So we really are going to start there. Then we want to talk to families, so both current families in early childhood, but also former families who may have rememberings of things that didn't work so well or things that worked well as they navigated that system. And then we'll go to technical assistance, and you'll notice that technical assistance is a big category. So coaches and support specialists, EI, EC, ECSE, I love all the acronyms, behavioral health and advocates, and really talking to those groups who might have ideas of how this should look, how they've done it before, again, what's not worked well. We're going to be doing that through the next 2 months pretty intensely, and then it's going to stay ongoing. And what's really important for this work and our work at Trauma Informed Oregon and all of our work is that you can't be trauma informed if you don't have ongoing feedback and critique of the work. And so we're going to make sure we're developing that. There's going to be a couple ways, both access to people, getting out in community, like we're going to be on site in places, and also Dahlia's going to step up kind of a technical way in which people can just keep giving us feedback, like an electronic, feedback box, right? Like that's not working. That's great. So we're going to find a way to do that. We're going to do this across the state, so across the regions, so that we make sure we hit the different experiences people have based on where they're located. We'll do this both directly, so calling people, talking to people, focus grouping, but we also will be utilizing our partners. So even some of you who are like, actually, Mandy, I have a great group in this area that we already meet together. You all can ask the same questions we're asking because you have a relationship. And so making sure that the questions that we're looking for, everyone has access to and can collect data from that participatory action kind of place. And the word IRB is on here because we're going to go after an institutional review board because we want to have that consistency across so that we're hearing and able to collect that information across, again, different types of providers, from the type of services to where they provide, and again, to the structure they provide those in. So I think I'm going to stop there. I'll open it up for questions, but the really big message is kind of be ready to give us feedback, but also be like, I'm ready to talk. Oh, I know you got to talk to this person. Oh, you got to talk to that person. Oh, I have connections here and there. Trauma Informed Oregon has a lot of connections across the state because of our work for the past, 8 years across the state, but we're going to want to make sure we're going to center voices that have not been heard first. And so we'll put time and resource into that. And then we'll be feeding that information back to you. But we really want to, trauma informed care and all the difficulty, even with those words, really is at the basic is using the impact of toxic stress, trauma, and harm by systems, and understanding that systems have harmed people, and therefore engagement needs to look different. And so we want to also model the model in our engagement. So you'll see some of that happen in how we do things, and that it may look different across sectors and cultures and identities to make sure people feel safe to provide that information. I don't know if you noticed I talk real fast.
That's perfect, Andy.
So yeah, I'll stop and see. I'll look in the chat to see if there's anything there, but
and nothing in the chat, but anybody have questions or comments? Well, I'm going to interrupt myself then and say, we will, after this, then go into breakout groups, which won't be specifically about this kind of engagement plan. It's just going to be about kind of everything that we talked about today. But if you do have specific questions related to what we just heard from Mandy, this would be great.
One quick thing to keep in front of us as we do the work is that you see here forming an advisory structure, because Oregon loves advisory committees. And so we do always have this usually as a thing. We want to start with an advisory committee. And what I really challenged Dahlia to do we're doing together is really think about advisory committees often don't work because they're stagnant and they're kind of the same people get on them, the same race gets on, same identities are present, and people don't always feel safe to share, and et cetera. So we really found it successful to have these multiple ways in which people can engage. And that's kind of how we're trying to develop this too. So a living advisory group that's dynamic and allows people to step in different levels of engagement and also different methodologies to share information, verbally, written, technologically, et cetera. So I just want you to keep that present. If you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't see myself being able to step into that, then we need to do it differently and add on stuff, which is really possible.
Thank you.
I just had a question just about as this engagement plan starts to unfold. I just wonder, will you also have access to translation for those communities that whose language is their first language is not English, in order to engage them? Will that be offered, or is that available? And then also, I just think about with the list of groups that you have on there on this slide. I think about how their time, nobody really has enough time during the day. And I think about I wonder if there's any type of compensation like in any way.
We're pretty big believers here at the Regional Research Institute that you compensate people for their lived experience. And when you're asking people for their opinions that unless it's like part of their job that's paying them to do that voicing. But so that's a model we follow. And yes, the translation on all levels. So language as well as accommodation of, deaf populations. And so, yes, all of that will be in the mix, and because we can't be trauma informed if we're not doing that. So yes, thank you for putting that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dominic. Thanks, Mandy. Any other? Oh, Carrie's moving us on. We probably do need to, don't we? In order to have some time.
To have some time, right?
Thank you so much, Mandy, for joining us, and Dahlia in spirit. I'm going to actually just toss it to you, Carrie.
Okay. So, we knew there was going to be a lot covered today. There's the conversation with Serena and Alyssa. There was the review of edits to the rule set and what the rationale was. And then there was the update on the timeline, the work to come, and the role of trauma-informed Oregon. So we just kept the idea boards that you've been using at previous meetings really general. So if you wanted to share some reflections, things you're happy about, some of the questions you want to keep in front of us, that's great. And then the wonderings are if you have ongoing questions or things that you would like ELD to consider, we wanted to just keep it as general as possible so you could comment on any part of today's discussion. So Remy's going to tell us how many groups we're bringing into, and she'll put the ideas board links in the chat. They're by group number, so you'll know what group you're in by looking at the top of the screen once you're in your group, and you'll see if you're like in group 1 or group 2.
Okay. Actually, Carrie, I wanted to just get on really fast and let me drop the idea boards in the chat really fast. So I'm doing it a little bit differently today. Instead of assigning you, I'm creating there are 3 different breakout rooms that I'm creating, and you can choose your breakout room. So there's going to be one breakout room that is specifically for people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. There's going to be one breakout room group that is for all identities. And then there's one breakout room for staff, because we have quite a few staff here. And if you want to get out of the large room and go talk to each other, we can throw you in the staff room as well. So let me drop the idea boards in the chat. We've got those, and I am going to open up these breakout rooms. Okay, Carrie, and I'm actually going to jump into the all identities room and take notes there. So I am leaving you as the host here, and anyone who's live streaming, this is going to be a pretty boring portion, but don't worry, we'll be back in 15 minutes.
And just for anyone, if the little box didn't pop up for you, there might be a little box at the bottom of your screen that says breakout rooms, or which you might be able to select from.
Yeah, if anyone's having any trouble, feel free to DM me which breakout room you want to be placed into, and I can do that as well.
I can help with assignments as I'll stay in this main room. And if anyone gets kicked out, I can put you back in your room.
Thanks, Carrie.
I missed it. What did I do? I
Yeah, what
opened
did
the
I
idea.
miss?
I'm in the ideas board, but I was like, I thought that was, I know that doesn't take me anywhere. So what's the other step?
I know, I'm there too.
Okay, I can move you guys. Do you want to be in the Black Indigenous People of Color group?
Yes.
I do, yeah, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like, okay, Remy, what are you doing different this time? I think Lydia stepped away.
Right. And then everyone else's staff.
I messaged Remy and asked her if she would join the all identities group for this part. Thank you again, Mandy, for joining us. I'm going to jump into the.
Yeah, that was my question. Was it felt like the all identities group was pretty tiny there, where Aaron is talking to Remy only.
That might be.
Your staff group only has one.
Oh, who is in there?
They seem to be liking themselves because they're staying there.
Oh, Allison is there. I'll go join Allison.
And Melinda and Meredith are free to join one of the two groups too.
Thanks, John. I'm transitioning my kid to home, so I will probably. Oh, excuse me. I am transporting my kid to home. Apology.
Get your language right, Mom.
I'm always learning and relearning and learning again.
You transfer me over?
Yes.
Hi, Lydia.
It doesn't look like Remy sent a timer. Should I just close all rooms?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Remy had it covered.
Oh, okay.
I just couldn't see it.
I feel like we need at least 5 more minutes.
I know.
Yeah.
No matter how much time we think we've left for the small group conversations, it's never.
It's never enough.
And you guys hang in there with a 3-hour meeting.
2 hour.
2 hour. Okay.
Let's not make it longer than it is, Gary.
I know.
I think we got kicked out too soon. I don't know. It felt like it.
This is not how it always is, Leslie.
Karina, we didn't coordinate on this part. We just have a little bit of time, so I think we just wanted to hear a little reflection if people wanted to share any major takeaways from your group conversation. I see just a few comments in the ideas board, so I didn't think I would, in our last conversation together, cover us all up with the ideas board and leave it open. But wanted to hear from anyone who would like to share if you had a major takeaway from the group conversation, or just what yourself would like to share about today's presentation and conversation.
I'll talk a little bit. I'll try. Because I shared this sentiment. I think that Dominic shared part of it was the conversation with Serena and Alyssa, and the intentionality to take these definitions and have them apply to work outside. So it's not siloed, and that's extremely refreshing and new. This language has not been heard in the realm of EC in our state in this way. And I think it's important to make sure it's consistent across. And I hope to see it in hiring, and job descriptions at Delk, all those places. And so I think that was good. And then there was a lot of wonderings about the question I raised about removing the behavior piece of that, because even though it's about to get, so we could find out what all the reasons are, but I feel like people may not see that what they did, if that's not there, it just doesn't fit. So maybe you won't get what you want. That's the only question. And I think Zakia raised a very strong thought that needed to be there. And that's going to cause a layer of work for you all to pin down what this was really about. If it was payment or violent behavior from a parent or all those kinds of things, are going to have to be another process. And maybe you could get in front of that by stating things clearly up front.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie. You got it.
Any other comments or reflections?
I do have one that I didn't, we just didn't have a chance to share. I didn't have a chance to share with the group, but as the culture shifts into the language that was shared today, I just also think about as an agency, as you make this shift, how do you keep yourselves accountable throughout this process? Not just through the beginning, but on a consistent basis of checking in with yourselves, with your values. But I just think about those types of supports along the way and processes that will help sustain this change that we've talked about over time. Just wondering.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dominic. I really appreciate that. I think it, like in the world of this type of work, the type of work that all of us do, it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day busyness and lose track of the values that we're grounded in. And I think that being intentional about that, building in ways that we hold that in front of us is super important. From a like structural kind of standpoint, the values around anti-racism, equity-focused practice are embedded in the statute that relates to, for both the statutes that came out of both House Bill 2166 and Senate Bill 236. And those statutes ultimately are what hold the ELD as an organization accountable. So does that mean that any one of us individually doesn't also need our own levels of accountability? Yes, we definitely do. But I think, in a sense, I'm comforted that it is in statute, that expectation is there, that we will, the ELD will do that as we develop this program and provide the services.
And I'll add that I was hopeful also because I saw there was a new position that seems an outwardly facing the equity strategist position that they're hiring at DELC, which I've been concerned about, that it seemed like whoever was doing the work as a representative DELC has been, or ELD has been more inwardly facing potentially. And I was hoping for something like that could continually be focused on this. So I like that too.
I think there's a lot of opportunities that in the transition from ELD to DELC that are kind of surfacing, so that there really can be that creation. Not that I'm sure there would have been ways for it to happen before, but I'm glad that those things are happening now.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel that, excuse me, you're putting actions to the words. And I think that's the biggest shift that I am seeing, that I haven't seen before. And you're talking about doing things like, not like they've been done before. And I'm seeing that in action. And I know this is a long road, but just to see this movement is very, is very hopeful.
Yeah, because the statewide trickle down is not going to be easy, right? As a fourth generation Oregonian.
And if I may, I think it's been such a beautiful experience to hear from all of you. And we've, in those internal conversations, like constantly like, but we heard this, right? But this was brought up, but like, because there is that relationship that we really value, right? Like relationships with all of you, and just understanding that you all have those connections to the families, to children, and we need to be listening as well. So I've really, really appreciated the conversations we've had, and just your liveliness and drive and commitment. So I am so excited for what is to come, and just hearing, today from Serena and Alyssa, also just as a team member of ELD, it makes me look forward to what, the relationships that we'll continue to foster, and how we'll continue to respond to the needs as quickly as we possibly can. I think that's one of the things that's so important. And it's difficult sometimes in these big systems, but we can do it because, systems are made up of people, is what I always say.
Just want to make sure we give everyone a chance to comment that who would like to. Well, we just really appreciate your time. I understand from Remy, this RAC has broken the record for the number of meetings that we had. And it shows the passion and commitment to both this topic and the overall continue advancing the early care and education field and the support that providers, families, and children need, and your insight in that. So we really appreciate all your time, and I'll defer to Katrina and Karina if there's any other final words to say, but we just wanted to say thank you so much, and we're really happy that you rejoined us for our 7th meeting.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of the time, the thought, the energy that you have devoted to this. I really appreciate it on so many different levels in creating, like, this is the foundation of creating this program and figuring out how we build it. And I'm so glad that you've been a part of it. And it's really true. Like when we joined this Zoom meeting this afternoon and I started seeing all of these familiar faces joining, it felt so familiar in such a good way. And so I really appreciate that. And I hope, I trust that there will be opportunities, even if it's not in a rules advisory committee, because Remy, we're not going to keep going forever, but that this group of people will continue to be actively engaged in this process. I also just want to note, like, Blanca, your background, your Zoom background with the kids on the fence, like, that's what it's all about. It's about the kids. It's about supporting them. It's about supporting you, Blanca, as a provider, and all the other providers to do this all important work. There is so much that happens in growth and development between birth and kindergarten, and it's impossible to put into words how much happens between 0 to 5. And thank you, all of you, for being here and for everything the whole way. And we might be able to end 2 minutes before 5. That's right, Blanca. Yes.
Well, we won't delay ending the